Hello, and welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad to have you here. The recent HBO series, The Gilded Age, has sparked a great amount of interest in America's Gilded Age, from around 1870 to 1920, or up to World War I, when America was ruled by a very few, very wealthy, powerful families. Now, full disclosure, I've not seen this show because I'm just so quirky and unique, and also because nobody will give me their HBO Go password. But I wanted to capitalize on its success and use it to my own advantage. So that's what I'm doing. Now, people are very interested in the social politics of the time and, of course, the pretty dresses and the pretty houses and all of that. But what happened to these families after the Gilded Age ended? Do they still maintain their power and influence? Well, in this series that I'm now launching, we're going to find out. We're going to follow different, very powerful Gilded Age families down the generations to today to see what's happened to them. And I can think of no better place to start than with the family that controlled the sacred 400, the 400 Gilded Age families who were considered in. They were part of the in crowd, the Astors. Mrs. Caroline Astor, the matriarch of the Astor family, was in charge of all of the Gilded Age etiquette. She decided who was in and who was out. So this seems like the perfect place to start. We're going to start with John Jacob Astor I, who lived from 1763 to 1848. He made his fortune in fur trapping in Canada, and he came to America in 1783. He did a lot of other things, but if I were to go through all of them, this video would be very long, and that's going to be true of all of the descendants. They did a lot more than what I'm just going to talk about, but I have to simplify. But he got his start in fur trapping, then he moved on into real estate and politics and lots of other things. He came to America in 1783, and by the time of his death in 1848, he had a net worth of around $20 million. In today's money, that's been estimated to be anywhere between $655 million to $121 billion. That is a huge, huge discrepancy, and I don't know how different economists have come up with such wildly different numbers. I think it's much more likely to be closer to 655 million. That's the number that I saw the most often, or numbers kind of around there, between like 655 to $700 million. The 121 billion was definitely an outlier, and it was from a less reputable source, and it seemed like that source was kind of confusing this John Jacob Astor with maybe some later John Jacob Astors, so I think it's much more likely to be closer to 655 billion, but still a ton of money. We're going to fast forward to the late 19th century when John Jacob Astor III would become the richest Astor in his generation. He lived from 1822 to 1890, and I've actually been unable to find an estimation of his net worth at the time of his death, but we can only assume that it was something quite monstrous. He would go on to found the English branch of the Astor family. This is where the Astor family splits into an English branch and to an American branch. The American branch is the one that's more famous and more well associated with the Gilded Age, because the Gilded Age was a specifically American thing. However, I'm going to cover both the English branch and the American branch because they're both still in existence today. John Jacob Astor III's son, William Waldorf Astor, and this is going to get very confusing. The Astor men all seem to be named either John Jacob or William Waldorf, or I think there were a couple of Waldorf Williams, but they tend to stick with the same names. So it got quite confusing to do this research, and you can see how some historians have kind of confused different Astor men. But John Jacob Astor III's son, William Waldorf Astor, 1848 to 1919, moved to England in 1891, and he became an English subject in 1899. He was created first Viscount Astor in 1916, just 3 years before his death. This title is still in effect today and is currently held by William Waldorf Astor III, 4th Viscount Astor, and it is expected that his son, creatively named William Waldorf Astor IV, will inherit the title upon his father's death. William Waldorf Astor III was born in 1951. He is still alive. He is part of the House of Lords, and he is a member of the Conservative Party. His net worth has been estimated to be between $1 and $7 million. Admittedly, I got this estimate from celebsage.wiki, which is not a reputable website, but it was the only place I could find estimating a net worth. So he's certainly wealthy, but he's nowhere near as wealthy as his 19th century ancestors. Now let's go back to America in the Gilded Age. William Backhouse Astor Jr., 1829 to 1892, became the head of the American branch of the family. His wife, Mrs. Caroline Astor, whom I mentioned earlier in this video, ruled the social scene in both New York and Providence, Rhode Island, because of her unofficial title as the head of the 400 families, or the 400 old money families who made up society in America at the time. William Backhouse Jr.'s son, John Jacob Astor IV, was born in 1864. By the time of his death, he had amassed a net worth of $87 million, which was equivalent to approximately $2.44 billion in today's money. This made him one of the richest men in the world. He also had the dubious honor, or the unfortunate honor, of being the richest man on the ill-fated RMS Titanic, which is where he died when it sank on April 15, 1912. When J.J. Astor IV died in 1912, his eldest son, William Vincent Astor, and side note, we have a new name in the family, Vincent, Alleluia, praise the Lord. But anyway, his son, William Vincent Astor, inherited $69 million, or approximately $1.9 billion in today's money. By the time he died in 1959, he'd managed to inflate this fortune to $200 million, although due to inflation, this didn't raise the actual net worth of the family very much. When he died, in today's money, he had a net worth of around $2 billion. So if you compare that to the 1.9 he inherited, he made a lot of money, but it was worth less because of inflation. His widow, Roberta Brooke Astor, born 1902, inherited $67 million, or approximately $620 million in today's money. The rest went to charity. This is where the Astor family fortune starts to drop off significantly, although they're still incredibly wealthy at this time. Brooke Astor continued to give money away, eventually earning the sobriquet, the First Lady of Charity. She gave away so much money that when she died in 2007, at the age of 105, her assets stood at a mere $200 million, which is still a ridiculous amount of money. But remember, she inherited the equivalent of $650 million in 1959. So she gave away a good $450 million. So good on her. But this is where the story gets kind of messy. Under Brooke Astor's will, her son, Anthony Drayden Marshall, born 1924, stood to inherit roughly $70 million, with the rest going to charity. He tried to challenge this will, and this led to him being slapped with many criminal charges, including, I have here a list, grand larceny and fraud, for which he was found guilty in 2009. My understanding is that just before his mother died, he had tried to get her to change her will and had done some things that constituted elder abuse and fraud and grand larceny, and he was prosecuted for those. After his 2009 guilty verdict, legal negotiations dragged on for another 2.5 years. In 2012, they finally concluded with a settlement in which Drayden Marshall walked away with $14.5 million, significantly less than he was originally going to be left in the will. If he'd just not been greedy and not challenged the will, he would have gotten $70 million. Of the $14.5 million that he got in the settlement, $11.6 million went towards his legal fees, leaving him with less than $3 million. A few other chunks of money went to Mrs. Astor's grandchildren, and the rest went to charity. Marshall died in 2014, leaving his assets to his widow, Charlene. I was not able to find a date of birth for her, but her assets have been estimated to be at around $1 million. So, the Astor money is mostly gone. There are some moderately wealthy descendants around today, but the family fortune is nothing like what it was 120 years ago. And I think that's a good thing. The money should not be hoarded into the hands of one family, but should go back to the people. Brooke Astor, I think, is a very great lady based on the very little that I read about her. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll join me next time when we cover the Vanderbilt family, another of the great American Gilded Age families. A huge thank you to Mary Royal, Sandra White, Emily Donnelly, Kit Kat Stitch, and V Birchwood for sponsoring this channel on Patreon. If you'd also like to sponsor this channel on Patreon, there's a link down below in the description. If you don't want to, no hard feelings, I completely understand. I'm also going to leave a link to my Instagram, where you should definitely follow me, and my email, so you can contact me if you want to. I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye. Which was equivalent to approximately which was equivalent to approximate